stars who brought you RuPaul's Drag Race and $1 Million Listing. This is World of Wonders Wow Report. Things that make us go wow.
Well, hello. I'm here with our Chief Creative Officer, Tom Campbell.
Hello, Fenton Bailey.
Oh, that's me.
Yes, welcome back.
Co-founder of World of Wonder. Yes, thank you. I've been away for the Easter break and things of that nature.
Flitting about the globe.
Flitting around, yes. And James St. James.
That's me.
Celebrating today your official...
Unbelievable.
His 10th
anniversary here at WOW, and the time just flies by.
Which you explained in your speech with cake and champagne.
Yes.
It was really 12 years, which is really...
Well, there's 2 years that we don't speak about. Where I was doing your job, and it did not end well.
Well, thank you for that, by the way.
Yeah, I paved the way for
Thank you.
And then...
and you get free car wash every week.
Free car wash every week, yes.
And a pin, which you're never going to wear.
And a gift certificate to the Grove, to the Apple Store.
Yes.
Very exciting.
And James, I first met you in the 80s, which is relevant because today what I thought we'd do is we would go in our hot tub time machine and talk about the top 10 things that made us go, wow, in the 80s.
Let's take it year by year, because the 80s, in my opinion, is the last great decade.
Well, it is, but it's interesting because it was the last decade that there was like everything that was happening: fashion, music, great television, great movies, like that. The 90s had great music, and some fun fashion, but it was the 80s was the last time it was all coming together.
Okay, so without further ado, let's get straight into it. Number 10, Tom.
Number 10.
I'm here to talk about the year 1980.
Oh, I remember it like it was yesterday.
Now, in 1980, I was still in high school in Newport, New Hampshire, home of the Tigers.
Go Tigers!
Where were you? And you weren't born yet.
Yeah, I was a swaddling child in my mother's arms.
Where were you in 1980?
I was 13. I was in Saginaw, Michigan.
Michigan, New
Yeah, we'll talk
Hampshire?
about that in a moment.
Where were you in 10 years? 1980?
I just started at Oxford reading English literature.
And Blake, our millennial producer in 1980, you were?
I was not even a twinkle in my parents' eye yet.
And you still aren't.
Not even a fleck of sperm, as they...
Now, a lot happened in 1980.
Well, yes, let's unpack it.
It was the Village People had a song called Ready for the 80s,
Yes.
which they weren't.
Well, it
sadly.
really was the sense of the beginning of a futuristic decade. There was a sense, this doesn't always happen with decades, that with 1980, it felt like the future has arrived.
Yes.
That was the sort of vibe in the air.
Well, if you remember, that was the year that MTV started, and I know you were going to talk about that.
I wasn't actually, but I like that you did. I mean, I also think the other, as futuristic as it was, let's not forget, because I think decades kind of don't really start into the middle of the decade.
That's true.
And the number one song of 1980 was... If you like pina coladas, and getting caught in the rain. So
that is a song that has no time.
No, that's a 70s song, really. It really is.
But it was the number one song in 1980. But I want to sort of laser focus on one event that I think was major, and we still feel today, which in 1980 was the year that John Lennon was shot and killed.
Right.
So it's almost like a sort of ritualistic killing of the old, so that
Out
the
with
new,
the old and with the new.
I mean, it's a terrible tragedy. So don't mistake. I'm not being callous about it.
You are not. You
but
are
he was such
proving...
an icon who, cast such an amazing shadow.
It was clunk. It was the end of an era.
And it was December 8th, 1980. It was a Monday night. He lived at the famous Dakota on Central Park West. Annie Leibovitz had spent the day there photographing him because he had a new album out, Double Ecstasy.
Yeah.
Is that what
Double Fantasy.
Double Fantasy.
Yeah.
That was another decade, Ecstasy.
Wait, and if you remember, that was the one that Yoko had the song on it with the bang, 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 rah! Remember that? Or no, no, that was her album afterwards.
Those are all of her albums.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
They all sound like that to me. I'm sorry. Sorry, Yoko. But and Fran Lebowitz was saying that she was promising that he would get the cover of Rolling Stone, and John insisted that Yoko be included in the photo. And of course, what came out of that
is that the famous
is the famous photo of him naked, kind of feetally kind of enjoying addressed Yoko Ono. But then he left, and the assassin, hate to make him famous, was Mark David Chapman.
Yeah.
And Mark David Chapman, he walked by him on the way out. They were going to the recording studio to do some final mixing on a Yoko track, and he stopped him and said, "May I have your autograph?" And there's a famous picture of John Lennon signing an autograph to his assassin, because when he came back that night, he didn't, they had a limo, but they didn't go in the gates. They just got dropped off at 72nd, and he was there, and he shot him dead. And what I didn't realize with Mark David Chapman, because I sometimes get him confused with John Hinckley Jr., who would go on to shoot Reagan the next year in early '81.
He was the one obsessed with Jodie
Foster. I get
yeah.
confused. But Mark David Chapman, who's still in jail.
Oh, wait, he was the one obsessed with The Catcher in the Rye, wasn't he? Yes.
He had Catcher in the Rye in his hand. After he shot John Lennon, he didn't move. He didn't resist arrest. He just stayed and waited. And someone was like, "What the fuck did you do?" But supposedly he had been plotting for a while, and also on his list, and he went to John Lennon ultimately because it was the easiest to get to. Also on his list, David Bowie, Johnny Carson, Marlon Brando, Walter Cronkite, Elizabeth Taylor, George C. Scott, Jacqueline Kennedy.
Well, what would have happened if we lost any of those?
And on the same day, he had a good taste. On the same day, he was also kind of trailing James Taylor. And James Taylor ran into him like at the 76th and the subway station, and he was kind of druggy and coked up. And
Taylor?
No, well, maybe. But Chapman, it's like all this came out afterwards that he was sort of trailing James Taylor too. So James Taylor escaped a thing. And then on the day of the murder, David Bowie was appearing on the Broadway play The Elephant Man.
I remember.
And supposedly, Bowie was second on the list of who
saw
to kill.
Elephant Man.
And Chapman had a front row ticket the next night, the night after the assassination.
God.
And so did John and Yoko. And David Bowie talks about...
They would have sat next to each other?
Well, they would have been in the front row. And David Bowie talks about that performance that night and 3 empty seats in the front row.
Wow. That is amazing.
I didn't know that.
It feels like a Netflix series, doesn't it? Like the level of detail.
We've got to monetize the show. We've got to sell some shows off of it. Anyway, a lot happened in 1980, obviously. We were all in different places. But I think, and I do remember my last little memory is I came down Tuesday morning on my way to school, senior year, and my mom was on the couch, and you just felt the darkness. You know, this is a weird thing. Watching the Today Show, and she goes, "They shot John Lennon." And my sister adored the Beatles, so they played through our house all of my youth. And my first thing I thought about that profound was like, they'll never reunite. Because, you know, all the 70s was like, when will the Beatles reunite? Right. They'll never reunite.
I do remember that I was a freshman in high school, and I remember opening out my locker first period, and my friend Lisa came running in, screaming, crying, "They killed John!" And everyone had started bawling in the hallway. And it was funny because I don't think any of them were real Beatles fans because they were too young, but it was just something that really affected everyone.
It was a tragic thing. So number 9. Number 9.
Number 9.
That's you.
Oh, well, yes, it is me. I was gonna talk about
Which year?
1981.
See what we're doing here? 80, 81. There's a lot of numbers that are going in different directions, so bear with us.
So I think you know where this is going. No, but I was going to talk about Tainted Love, and then, of course, I realized, having a senile moment, I've already talked about Tainted Love.
Ad nauseum.
I didn't want to say anything.
Kaplink plink. You know, I love that song. But it did make me think, you know, there was something happening at this time. I was a student, and it was all about futurism. You know, I saw Metropolis for the first time, and the fashions were shoulder pads and jackets that sort of zipped up right across diagonally. Fiorucci.
Right. Klaus Nomi.
Yes, it was very space age. And what was happening in Britain was there were all these synth bands starting up. It was the first time that synthesizers really broke the charts in number. I mean, the Tainted Love was the best-selling song of 1981. Of course, there was still... Don't You Want Me, Baby?
Yes.
James.
I'm sorry,
Don't you want me, baby?
James is watching cute guys walk by the window.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Me, baby.
I mean, these real sort of annoying earworms. And, of course, Bowie, who we were just talking about.
Oh, Scary Monsters.
At the end of the previous year had released the album Scary Monsters, of which the classic track, Ashes to Ashes. Now, Ashes to Ashes isn't really a synth track. I mean, it's a little bit, but the video completely set the palette for the 80s. It was
had
this posterized, solarized look, and they were walking on a beach, right?
They're walking on the beach, and he's with the outfit. But it's also the first time we'd ever seen Boy George. It was the first time we'd ever seen Steve Strange here in America.
Because he's walking along the beach with a bulldozer behind him, which is just a fantastically surreal, just very 80s thing to have done, with an old lady walking beside him who's like a sort of mother figure. And there, as James says,
all the people from
Steve
Taboo.
Strange, Boy George, they're just extras in this
And
video.
And what was Taboo? Forgive me.
Taboo was the club at the time.
Where the Blitz Kids went.
With the Blitz Kids,
Okay.
and it was Lee Bowery and everybody.
And it was this
And
fabulous sort of visual salad, right?
Yeah, and it was like it was Club Kids before Club Kids, and it was all those. It was all the people who were later becoming famous. But this was the first time in America that we'd ever seen them.
That's right. And they became the New Romantics, which was perfect timing because they were so visual, and MTV had just launched in America. And out of that came one of my favorite singles of all time, Steve Strange, Fade to Grey.
Oh, right.
Devenir en gris, because it was also trendy in the 80s to speak in different languages.
Well, I'm going to touch
I'm
on
singing
this.
the Pina Colada song. You're doing your
Oh, it
music.
was
We had
so
different points of view.
cool.
Brittany
It was-
still tries to sing in different languages.
Yes, she does. I mean, it was, but this is when it all began.
Well, I remember the first album,
yes,
the first song
yes.
on Scary Monsters. He was singing in Japanese. Remember there was the
That's
Japanese
right,
woman
yes,
singing. Yeah.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It made me sort of go back, and there were so many. But it was Soft Cell, yes. There was Human League, yes. Also Depeche Mode. Remember Depeche Mode? New Life, Yazoo, and then James, you must know this. The Normal. Warm Leatherette.
Oh, warm. Yes,
Warm, which was a very
Grace
bleak
Jones.
electro. Well, Grace Jones covered it, but it was first released by Daniel Miller, who owned Mute Records, and he created the band The Normal. It was just him and some synthesizers. He signed Depeche Mode. He signed Yazoo, and he also had a band called the Silicon Teens, which was just these kids who didn't exist. It was a virtual band. I mean, it was also futuristic.
Now, you know, there was a new documentary that just came out on YouTube. It's a 10-minute documentary about Yazoo.
10 minutes?
Okay.
Yeah, it's just a 10-minute documentary, and it's
Okay.
Alison Moyet
You gotta get
and
that.
who's the guy from
Oh, it's Vince Clarke.
Vince Clarke.
Thank you.
And it's the two of them talking about how the band came together and the sound came together. And they were saying that the interesting thing is that at that time there was all this sort of futuristic robotic music,
Yes.
but it was all these robotic sounding vocals.
Yeah.
But she was the first one to come along and do
And
a blues
really
voice.
belt it
was
out,
a blues
yeah.
voice with robotic synth, and it sort of
Yeah.
changed the game for the rest of the 80s.
Well, if you want to know more, there is actually a BBC documentary also on YouTube called Synth Britannia, which is how you can all of the bands are in this, and it was really such a movement, and it was quite an amazing moment, and sort of appropriate because IBM launched the first PC in 1981.
And it all comes together.
So on that note, let's go on to number 8.
Number 8.
Number 8 is 1982.
82.
Another year I remember well. It's interesting that you should talk about how the synth pop movement started in 81 in Europe, in England,
Yeah.
because we didn't really get it here until 83,
Later. Yes.
82, 83.
Kids in America.
All we had really was Flock of Seagulls, if you remember.
And
in the meantime,
Run.
it was like Billy Squire. It was like a lot of like really horrible, like Loverboy was like a lot.
Yes.
Dave. Anyway, we had that. I remember very vividly in my high school there were two types of girls. You had a Pat Benatar. You were either a Pat Benatar or you were a Belinda Carlisle. And never the twain shall meet. I remember that like it was yesterday. Those are the two styles, and
That's
the
a
guys were
win-win.
all Billy Squire. We all had the tight pants,
Yes.
the tight jeans with your bulge and the little crotch and the big hair. Yeah, I remember. 82 was also the year of E.T.
Oh, it's a good
It
movie.
was the year that Prince William was born.
But does that make me feel old?
And me.
It was the
Yes.
year, this is very important, it was the year that ciabatta bread was invented in Verona, Italy.
What? That is not true.
No, it's totally
I
true.
was an au pair in Rome in 1979, and I lived off ciabatta
No,
bread.
you did
Yes,
not. I
did.
I tell you it's not true. It was also the year of the Tylenol scare.
Tylenol
They
killer.
had tainted Tylenol,
Yes.
which is why we have all those one of the reasons
That's why
we
you
have all
can't
those
open the bloody
Yeah.
pill bottles.
It's true. It was also the year that Princess Grace died. Remember, her Princess Stephanie drove her off the cliff.
Princess Grace is so beautiful. I wonder what she'd be saying if she were alive today.
She would probably be here. We would probably have her as a special guest star.
She'd be saying, "Let me out, let me out."
Oh, no.
That was a bad joke going around my high
But
school.
I did want to
Sorry.
talk a little bit about some of the movies of 1982 because it was a banner year for movies.
It was.
It was my favorite movie of all time. I mean, literally, bar none.
Really?
Annie.
E.T.
The movie Annie.
I love Annie.
No.
It's a hard knock.
I love Annie.
Dumb
The Broadway
dog,
soundtrack.
Why are you
James.
following me?
You have
I ain't
E.T.
gotta come.
You have
dog.
Blade Runner.
How about letting
you have
me be?
these incredible science fiction milestones,
You
and
do.
you're banging
I
on about
love
Annie.
It was also Grease 2, which is your favorite movie.
No, Grease is my favorite movie. I hated Grease too.
I love Grease too.
It was also Blade Runner, which Blade Runner, E.T.
Never
you
watched
have,
Blade Runner, it's too long.
World According to Garp, which was one of my favorite. It was one of those books that really spoke to me when I was growing
It's
up.
on my list. I'm going to get to it, I promise.
Last American Virgin, Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Saw that one.
Halloween 2. I mean, I've
Halloween
told
1
you the
was
story
better.
about how the first time I had sex, and it was with this boy at school.
You were in the surf.
No, and then
Who was wearing the
afterwards,
mask?
afterwards we went to go see Halloween 2, and I remember our legs were touching each other, and it was just this frisson of like energy of like, oh my god, like of being like terrified
Yes.
and turned on at the same time.
Oh.
And whenever I hear that music, I get an erection. Also,
I thought that sounds like the Twilight
very
Zone.
quickly, I'm going to talk just very
I'm
quickly
getting
the
a hard on
top
this
songs
thing.
of the year. Physical was number 1.
Now we're talking my language.
Eye of the Tiger was number 2. Centerfold Jay Giles was number 5.
Centerfold.
Okay, we have to take a quiz
Tainted
break.
Love
Break.
hit us. That was number 6. We didn't
'cause-
get it till 1982.
Oh, sorry.
Also,
Okay.
the Go-Go's We Got the Beat and Vacation and Our Lips Are Sealed.
Are you going to stop?
Gloria, Gloria.
Brannigan, God rest her soul.
I am advancing to say the 80s is all about the future, and I'll tell you this: it was the first emoticons appeared in 1982, and the first computer virus.
There were no emoticons. There were no
Yes,
poop
there
emojis.
were. We have to take a quick break. When we come back, I've got a quick question.
Wait,
for
wait,
you,
wait,
though.
can I tell you what the
Okay,
worst song of all
whoa, whoa,
time was 1982? The worst song ever.
Stop.
And this is my trivia.
Okay,
I've been to
okay.
paradise,
Don't
but I've never been to
worry,
me.
be happy.
No. Abracadabra. I want to reach out and grab ya.
Oh, magic.
Abracadabra.
Steve
Steve Miller Band.
Steve Miller
Yes,
Band.
I
wanna
love that
reach out
song
and
of
grab
all
ya.
time.
I
Me
love
too.
that song. Let's play it. Okay. When we come back, the answer to this question is: who was Time Magazine's Man of the Year in 1982? You're listening to the Wow Report on Radio Andy. We'll be right back after the break.
You're listening to World of Wonders Wow Report.
Hey guys, it's Tatiana here reminding you to make good choices and get your tickets for RuPaul's DragCon LA. That's going to be May 11th, 12th, and 13th. So get your tickets today at RuPaul'sDragCon.com. See you there. Choices!
Welcome back to the Wow Report here on Radio Andy. We were just listening to Steve Miller Band, Abracadabra, one of my favorite songs.
And James's too.
It's his least favorite ever.
The worst song of 1982.
Anyway, so the question was before the break, here's what we're doing. We are counting down the top 10 things in the 80s that made us go, wow.
Yeah, year by year. The whole friggin' decade.
We're going year by year, and we've reached, we're about to broach 1983. But first, before the break, who was Time Magazine's Man of the Year in 1982? And of course it was, you know, in those days it was Man of the Year. It wasn't Woman of the Year.
I'm going to
anything,
say
right?
it was Reagan because I'm lazy.
See, I'm going to go and say like Boris Yeltsin or something like that.
I like that.
You're both wrong. It was the computer.
Why
the 80s.
That whole it was a whole red herring when you said it was a man.
Yes, that was just throw you off.
Oh, you.
It's quite good, isn't it? Yes. Okay,
We've
so
lost our man.
Our technical support.
Blake,
We're wigging it. We have no
Blake, our
super-
millennial producer, was here, but he's disappeared. That's because he wasn't born. It's a sort of
Yeah.
going back in time. Tom, what have we got at number 7?
Number 7.
1983. I was a sophomore at Harvard. You know, the thing about the 80s and us, because we're all kind of the same age, I know, is like you are in your teens and 20s and pop culture just flows through your blood. And there's like, I could talk about a million things from this decade because, you know, Thriller, which was released in 82 technically, but caught on fire in 1983. Flashdance, the movie, MTV was out. It was the first movie that really spoke like in a totally visual style. And the crazy dancing and the manhunt.
The dress, the torn sweatshop
Yes.
dresses.
Yes.
I had one.
Yes, I did too.
Because I had the kind of body then.
Yes. Karen Carpenter sadly died
no.
of anorexia.
Right.
So 83 was really the first time like we'd all heard the word anorexia. I don't think it was really commonly
Was that also
understood.
the same year that Mama Cass died?
No, I think that was in the 70s.
Okay.
And but we're doing the 80s, but whatever works for you.
But I thought everyone said that there was the joke that if Karen Carpenter just gave Mama Cass the sandwich, they'd both be alive.
Yes, but they connected them decades apart.
Oh,
It was
I
just a
did.
mean joke.
Okay.
But, you know, I did do my Princess Grace joke, so you're totally... there's still the worst joke than that has been told today. And Risky Business, which was when Tom Cruise was so... Like, him in the underwear dancing.
I think that was the breakout moment for Y-fronts.
Yes,
Right?
for jockey
Brie,
shorts.
jockey
Yes,
shorts, right.
so good.
Because they weren't jockey shorts, were they? They were Y-fronts.
Yeah.
You know, the tighty whities.
Yeah.
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 I wrote a
I love when he says extraordinary Y-fronts. And then also a big movie, which ties into my big topic, was The Big Chill. Which one of the things that distinguished it was the soundtrack was all Motown songs, and even though Motown's in the 60s,
there you go, just brought you
Motown
in.
was back, baby. And in 1983,
Well, that was also the year of the raisins, right? The Motown raisins.
they're everywhere.
Okay.
but they did a special called Motown Yesterday, Today, and Forever that Suzanne DePass produced. That it was the 25th anniversary of when Motown was founded in 1959, and Junior Walker performed, and Lionel Richie and the Commodores, and Marvin Gaye in one of his last public appearances, who was coming back with Sexual Healing. So that was a huge song before he died in 84. But he did a whole like Black history at the piano, and then he sang What's Going On. It was really soulful. Mary Wells and Martha Reeves made an appearance. The Miracles reunited, even though Smokey and his wife Claudette were divorced. They all got together and they did a medley. Stevie Wonder performed. The Temptations of the Four Tops revived their career at that moment. And
It's like
again,
a 60s duo.
yes,
But-
blows your mind. And Linda Ronstadt was on singing Track of My Tears with Smokey Robinson. Adam Ant was singing Where Did Our Love Go?
Stop it! I don't remember that.
Oh my God, you gotta watch it. It's so
Adam
good.
Ant. Oh my God!
But two things happened at this event that changed the course of pop culture.
Yes.
The first was the Jackson 5. Michael Jackson and the Jackson 5s reunited. They had all left Motown. So this was a big night for Berry Gordy's and the thing. But the Jacksons had been, because Jermaine stayed at Motown anyway, they were reunited and they did a medley of their hits. I'll Be There, Stop Loving You, Say ABC. And then Michael Jackson, whose song Billie Jean was #1 in the country, said, you know, I am... And they all walked off stage. He's kind of, I really I like the old songs a lot, but I like the new songs too. And he put on a hat and boom, 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 boom. They started playing Billie Jean, and for the first time in America, and it changed. He moon danced.
Yeah.
And when you watch it and repeat, he moon dances for like 1.8 seconds. Like it's so short. But everyone's wig. As Katy Perry would say, wig.
It was all anyone talked about for the next month and a
Rest
half.
of his career.
Yes, I mean,
Moonwalker was the name of his
he was in
autobiography.
that gold, the black sequin sweater and the fedora and the red bow tie and just moonwalked, and it changed pop culture
and
forever.
But also it's one of those points where pop culture could be, everyone could be on the same page.
Right, because everyone in the world watched this.
Yeah,
There was nobody was watching Game of Thrones
and
on one
there was
channel.
no internet.
The
Yes,
Wire.
the #1 show of the week. And Michael Jackson was already a huge star. Had been around for a decade and a half. But this moment cemented his God status.
But he was a 70s star, and this brought him into the 80s in a way that he hadn't been.
And last but not least, I'm getting the wrap-up sign, but also reuniting the closing act, the biggest star in the world before Michael Jackson moonwalked. Just moments before he moonwalked, the biggest star in the world was Diana Ross. Yeah. And Diana Ross and the Supremes reunited. And
well, not.
They did for a second, and Diana was off. She had been sucking a lollipop or something. Her tongue was purple. I have to say, in her defense, Mary Wilson and Cindy Birdsong were in big, sort of oversized gowns, and Diana wore a pencil skirt and a beaded thing.
Bitch.
But she supposedly, as legend goes, Mary Wilson told Cindy Birdsong to sing low during sound check so that their voice would be louder in the mix when they sang, and it's all been edited out. But the rumor was before is that Diana Ross shoved Mary Wilson, because Mary Wilson started to sing and invite Berry Gordy down from the balcony before she was supposed to, and Diana Ross was like, I'll take care of it. And they're the only group that didn't do their medley, and they have not been together since. Diana and Mary have never pulled it together. Maybe they will, but it was that moment, and it built into, and Diana Ross, if you're listening, and I know you are, I love you more than almost my mother, and I defend you, but it was that moment in the pop ethos that Diana Ross as the bitch, it's fed into that narrative.
that narrative is not a false narrative. I'm sorry. I love her too, but I always thought she was pushing the others out of the way, even when they were like a little breakout
we've seen Dream Girls, we know.
Yeah.
But it's not her story.
But I do want to say, though, the other thing about Michael Jackson was that Michael Jackson hadn't been played on MTV. They would not play him until this moment happened, and that was the thing that broke the barrier, and Michael Jackson was allowed to be on MTV, followed by Prince, and then it broke the
So you think
color barrier.
1983?
Yeah,
black artists were still not being allowed to be on mainstream music channels.
Shocking but true.
Yeah.
And my mom had the Big Chill tape, and that's where I learned a lot of those
all the Motown songs. Blake was one. He was in the cradle. Thank you, Blake.
Okay, so we are now moving on, James, as we count down the 80s year by year. We've reached number 6.
Number 6.
Number 6 was 1984.
It was indeed.
That was a good
1984 was a good year.
The big year of the book.
I started off 1984. I had graduated early, and so from
high school.
From high school, yeah.
Because you were so brilliant.
Because I was so brilliant. Well, no, actually, because I had to audition for NYU to get into the School of the Arts. So I graduated at Christmas, then came to NYU to audition, and I remember like it was yesterday because you had to have 2 monologues and a song. Okay, now. My monologue, I decided to write myself. It was about a toaster. I did it in the style of Gertrude Stein.
We can blow up the rest of the show and just do your audition.
And it was like the toaster, and when you boasted on the toaster, and the toasted roasted roasted. It was like I did it all Gertrude Stein.
Do you still have that?
I don't have it anywhere. You lie. And then the song, because I couldn't sing, there was a children's record that I used to listen to when I was little about a possum, a girl possum, and she sang these songs, and I remember it was a song about Mr. Stone all alone waiting for someone to pick him. Mr. Stone has his own friends who come along and kick him. And I did this singing in a British accent, and I'm sure they were looking at me like, what the fuck is going on?
Were you James St. James at that time?
No, I wasn't, but I was trying to get into the experimental theater wing of NYU.
They gave you a scholarship.
And I think they said, this kid from Michigan, we need to fill up our quota from people from Michigan. I wasn't offering to pay. I didn't need
financial aid.
I was going to pay full, right? And I think they were like, just let him in, let him in. So, but I remember I was staying at the Ritz when I was there, and we had a view. I had a view of
the Ritz Hotel or the Ritz nightclub.
No, the Ritz Hotel.
Oh my God!
And I had a view of Central Park, And I remember getting up that morning and turning on the radio, and it was Tina Turner, "Let's Stay Together." It was before the album came out.
Wow!
And I didn't know who it was, and I remember just the sun coming up, and it was one of those songs that just changed my life. And it was.
It did? How did it change your life?
I don't know. It just gave me chills. There was just something. It was like something beautiful about the song that I'd never heard the song before. I didn't know the Al Green version. Right. And then later, when I went to Florida, I went to stay in Florida with my dad, and I would sneak out and go to the gay bars, and they played that nonstop. And it was just it was before Private Dancer came out. It was before.
It's that the success of that single gave the record company permission to say, do an album.
Exactly. And it was the gays. It was the gay clubs that was playing that song.
It was a club track.
It was
because there was a video of her like with 2 dancers just kind of.
Yes, and it was before Let's Stay Together. It was before all those other songs came out. And so this was 1984. 84 was also at the same time. It was when Holiday first came out, and it was on the radio. And we didn't know anything about Madonna at the time. No. And outside of New York, we thought that she was an African-American singer. We thought we had no idea who she was. And I remember it started breaking in like April, borderline. The video came out April, May, June, and that to me, we've talked about this before, where there are songs that will make you cry, just those opening chords, and I will start sobbing.
That's still one of my favorite Madonna songs.
Were you born then?
Too.
Yeah. I was born then.
Blake had arrived on the planet.
But I do remember going to the Copacabana was the club in Fort Lauderdale that I used to go to, and I would ride my bike down the highway to get there.
So nervous about him getting home safely.
I know, right? But I remember the weekend that I was going back to graduate. I was going back to for the graduation ceremony, and that weekend it was Divine performed there on Friday night, and Madonna performed on Saturday, and it was a stage the size of this table.
Sure,
and you were there?
I was front row for both of them, and I remember it was just one of the, and I will never forget that weekend as long as I live. I do want to just also say there was a song called Dog Police. Do you remember Dog Police? I just listened to it this
Who
afternoon.
let the dogs out?
No, it was sort of a Devo band, Devo-esque band, and it was called the Dog Police. And they later had a series called the Dog Police. It was people in dog masks
You
from
mean
another
the Puppy
planet.
Pound?
No.
I think we can sell that.
I
I think we can sell that.
Also, I want to say that Purple Rain was that year.
It was a great year for music.
Yeah, the Pointer Sisters jump was
yes,
huge.
it was Footloose.
The Olympics. I was my first summer in L.A. and it was the summer of the Olympics, and it was an amazing time.
Right. Also, Terminator was that year. Splash, Karate Kid, Footloose, Romancing the Stone, 16 Candles, Children of the Corn, Muppets Take Manhattan, and Streets of Fire.
And Ronald Reagan won with the biggest landslide in history.
Well, he won because he'd been shot early in 1983, right? Was that the
It was
year?
81.
It was
Yeah.
81? Oh.
But anyway, you get I think with Ronald Reagan's landslide election, you get that is when the 80s began in the sense of the affluenza of it
Yes.
all, right?
But
The money, the success, the fame, the
that
glamour.
part, the greed is good at
The greed is
ethos
good,
and
I
everything.
think, yes.
But you've got to remember that there was the two 80s. There was the early 80s with Culture Club,
Right.
Cyndi Lauper.
The gender bender,
all
I
that
mean,
stuff.
you can't say gender bender now, but then you could.
Right, and
that's
there
what it
there
was then.
the Cyndi Lauper, there was Modern English, Kaja
androgynous.
all of those
Yes,
people.
it was like, yeah.
But then that ended very quickly in 85, and that's when we moved into
was
like
Ralph
Motley
Lauren
Crue.
show.
And what a segue.
It was Ralph.
Sorry, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Number 5.
Number 5, 1985, the new Coke fiasco. You see, this was the centennial. I didn't realize this. This was the centennial of Coke, and they hadn't supposedly changed the formula in 100 years.
Since they used it with
And-
cocaine in it.
Right.
I remember those.
Well, they didn't officially. I think they tweaked the formula. Like, I think they just let the cocaine drop. But anyway, on April 23rd, they introduced new Coke. And the interesting, I didn't really. I mean, there's books. There's a book about it called The Cola Wars, and in fact, I think there's even a documentary series coming out about it. But what I didn't realize is, well, of course they did. Coke did market research tests, and about 10-11% of the people objected, but they just thought, oh, overall the figures are great. Everyone likes it. Who cares about this 10%? But
Well, 10% equals 10 billion people, doesn't it?
But what also happened during these market research tests is that they noticed that the 10% who didn't like it exerted undue influence on everybody
Which
else.
we know now in the Trumpian age.
Right?
Yes, it's the
So-
30% influenced the entire world.
Yes,
and-
the loud minority.
Exactly.
Do you know about New Coke, Blake?
I've heard of it. Yeah, I
Oh,
never.
it
I don't.
It literally was
I don't-
like it's New Coke. It had New Coke was the name of it. and-
Right. I don't remember tasting it, but I saw that they sold it until July 02.
July 10th is when they this was like a 3-month disaster, basically. And at first it seemed to go okay, and then people started to rebel. In fact, it was when they went south to the original bottling plants in Atlanta, which is, of course, where Coke is headquartered.
Yep.
That's when the rebellion started. And it quickly became cast in these Civil War terms, this sort of prism of North versus South.
Well, do you remember
And-
what it tasted like? 'Cause I
yes,
remember
I do
very
remember.
well.
It was more like Pepsi.
It was
sweeter.
syrupy.
It was sweeter.
And here's the other thing about it, the whole taste test and the market research. There are two kinds of tests. There is the sip test, which is just blind taste testing. You have a sip. And then there's where you give people a bunch of cans and they take them home. And the point is that you may sip something and enjoy a sip, but if you're just knocking back Cokes or Pepsis, which do you prefer over a longer period of time? And people preferred traditional Coke because it was less sweet, whereas Pepsi was too sweet to...
So you're saying New Coke was out for 3 months before they brought back
Basically.
Classic
Before
Coke?
they brought back Classic
and
Coke.
they marketed it as Classic Coke. But it was
Yes.
this huge marketing debacle because you had
It
two.
was.
And now, of course, what they do is there's Lime Coke and Diet Cherry Coke and Vanilla Coke. They just add more and more.
But they still even now use Coca-Cola Classic, and there's not even the old, So that kind of turned into an
They
awesome
kind of
marketing.
do, but they definitely retired New Coke. New Coke went away.
But then you went. I remember thinking at the time that it was all a ploy to get us back into to think, oh my God, the new Coke is back and now it's better than ever. And we need to go back to it again.
Well, that's the other unanticipated result of this. In fact, it was a huge success for them because
Yes.
their overall market share went way up
Yes.
as a
Didn't
result
know
of this
that.
debacle.
Because I remember at the time, because it was like, oh my God, it's back. We have to go get it.
To such an extent that people thought the whole thing was a conspiracy actually from the beginning.
I remember
they've
that.
done it deliberately. And actually, in a way, I do think this marks the beginning of that sort of where you take one brand and slice it into 1,000 different brands, like Oreos.
Yes.
You know, you have all these different flavor Oreos. It's the beginning of that
Yes.
you have one
Own
brand.
the shelf is kind of the notion.
Yes.
But also, we're having a special, and this is something new, and it's fantastic, and then it's like, now we're going back to the old, and it's like, you're surprised.
So you're
classic.
suggesting that Trump is the new Coke of democracy and that it's all just a ploy by Trump for us to return to our basic...
Well, this lasted longer than 3 months. You know, Fidel Castro, a longtime Coca-Cola drinker, contributed to the backlash, calling New Coke a sign of American capitalist decadence. How's that for truth speaking? Truth to power. And
I wouldn't have a sip of anything in the 80s without Fidel Castro weighing in.
But when was Clear Coke? When was that?
That was Clear Pepsi, right? And I think that was
Crystal
93.
clear.
it's Crystal Pepsi.
93.
Do you remember that? When was that?
93.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll do that some other time. On April 23rd, by the way, the day that Coke announced New Coke, PepsiCo gave their employees the day off, saying, by today's action, Coke has admitted it's not the real thing. Isn't that fantastic?
I love it.
Anywho, so we have to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll carry on with the countdown of the things that made us go, wow, in the 80s.
Yes.
But I have a question for you.
Yeah.
James.
Yeah.
You know we have a thing for Oreos on this show.
We do.
Mm-hmm. So what did Oreos do actually in 1984? What did they introduce in 1984?
Okay.
Hey, you're listening to the Wow Report on Radio Andy, SiriusXM.
You're listening to World of Wonders Wow Report.
Hey guys, it's Jeffrey Boyer Chapman. I'm going to be at RuPaul's Drag Con this May 11th, 12th, and 13th, 2018 at the LA Convention Center. You can get your tickets at RuPaul'sDragCon.com. I've done panels at the last 2 RuPaul's Drag Con in Los Angeles and New York, and it is better than gay Christmas. From doing panels, being able to answer and interact with all of you fans who are obsessed with the shows just as I am, it's an extraordinary dream come true. My favorite part about Drag Con is the celebration of love, the celebration of queerness, the celebration of otherness. It's an opportunity for us to be surrounded by our tribe and celebrate the things about us that make us us, which is beauty and love and light and is so special. So come join us. You won't regret it. Come say hi, come meet me, give me a hug, take a selfie. I'm really friendly.
Welcome back. So we are counting down the top 10 things that made us go wow in the 80s.
Best decade ever.
We're going year by year. I'm here with James St. James, Tom Campbell, and Blake.
Hi.
Jacobs. Hi.
Hi, Fenton Bailey. Like to get your name in there too. I do.
Like people care. So here's the thing.
do.
We were just talking about New Coke and Coke Classic. I'm trying to reel you back in, James. I'm trying to get you back. Oreos in 1984. What did Oreos do? Because Oreos have become the king of...
So we say it together. 1, 2, 3.
Double stuff. But it can't be double stuff because
Oh.
double stuff were they around earlier than that? Maybe it was like a mint Oreo.
You are
That's right.
so close. No, I mean, I really didn't know this. They introduced big stuff.
What?
You know, the 80s, it was
Those
like
are Hydrox.
big time, Peter Gabriel. Everything was big. The big breakfast, you know, everything.
Oh, because
big,
if you remember
big.
the
Frankie
song
says-
was Mr. Big Stuff. So
Yes.
thank you.
Yeah,
that was
from
the
the
commercial.
60s.
But that was the commercial for Oreos.
The big stuff Oreo was the size of 10 cookies at
yes,
316
I do remember
calories.
because this is the song. They had Mr. Big Stuff.
And what was very 80s about it? Do you know how they spelt stuff?
STUPH.
Close.
Just one F. No, two.
What F?
Yo,
Big stuff.
Big
So
stuff.
80s. So,
That way
okay.
we can control it.
We are up to number 4. Tom.
Number 4.
1986. I graduated finally after I took a 5-year course at Harvard, which included some time off. But I graduated. It was my senior year. It was my summer traveling to Europe and East Asia, and I moved to Los Angeles wholeheartedly, full force in the fall of 1986. The number song of the year was "That's What Friends Are For." Thank you. Another big hit of that year, "On My Own." Patti LaBelle and Michael McDonald. And of course, Whitney Houston was on fire. How Will I Know? The Greatest Love of All. West End Boys by Pet Shop Boys. West End Girls, excuse me. Papa Don't Preach. I had like a Walkman. I listened to Papa Don't Preach, Live to Tell, and When I Think of You by Janet Jackson.
When I think of you. Oh, that was terrible. I'm sorry.
I loved it. and it was like the videos and 3 thoughts. But on a sad note, the Space Shuttle Challenger, after being in space for 73 seconds, burst along with Krista McAuliffe, the teacher.
I was going to say, how many Krista McAuliffe jokes do you remember?
From New Hampshire. Well, a bunch. And Alf and Pee-wee's Playhouse premiered that year.
Oh, you know, I've just been reading about Alf. I mean, that was a crazy show. The backstory behind that and what was going on behind the scenes.
My little sister was obsessed with Pee-wee.
He was a coke freak, and he was sexually abusing all the
Alf
staff.
the alien.
Yes.
We'll talk about that.
And the writer was, the author of a very famous author.
Truman Capote.
No. But he was a big drug addict, and so everything that was going on behind the scenes was just chaos.
To me, Burroughs. Given the power of a year,
Midnight
1986.
Sun,
Midnight in the Good Garden of
No.
Sorry, we're just going down.
Hi, everybody. Something happened in 1986.
Yes.
Someone was introduced to the American public that you can't imagine ever did not exist. And in 1986 was the first Oprah Winfrey show.
That is crazy.
I was on Oprah in '85 when it was just the Midwest.
AM Chicago.
AM Chicago.
You were on it?
I was on it twice. In fact,
what else?
He was singing that song he auditioned with.
Mr. Stone, all alone. No, I was on it. And I remember everyone in Chicago kept saying, "Have you met our Oprah yet? Have you met our Oprah yet?" And we went on camera, and every time the camera would go off to a commercial, she would sign copies of The Color Purple, and she wouldn't talk to anyone. And we thought she was the biggest bitch. We thought she would never make it.
You were right on.
What were you on for?
Celebritantes, of course, darling. We'll get to that.
In 1985, she had done The Color Purple, and she had been nominated for an Oscar because Steven Spielberg had seen her on local AM Chicago.
Yeah.
But her show did not get syndicated. I didn't hear of her until 1986.
That is crazy. I didn't realize that.
I didn't realize that
it was
either.
in the Midwest. It was like it had a huge chunk of the country,
Okay.
but it wasn't New York or
So
LA.
it wasn't her first time at the rodeo.
No, but she had. But in 2 years, she had become like she'd overtaken Donahue in Chicago, and Roger Ebert, a friend of hers who was in Chicago, said, you should make a deal with the King brothers and go syndicate yourself. I was doing a little bit of research. One little fun thing is like supposedly, Oprah was named after Orpah. In the Bible, the story of Ruth.
But when they got her,
there was a
birth
typo on the birth
certificate,
certificate.
yeah,
they called her Oprah, and I remember, but used to call her Oprah Winfrey. It was like because it was the most unusual name. You never heard the word Oprah, and so it'd be like, is it Oprah Winfrey? Is it Winfrey Oprah? But all that kind of stuff. And I found I've lost it now, but I found the 1986 review from the Hollywood Reporter, which they were like, Oprah Winfrey is one to speak her mind, and starting this week, viewers in the greater LA area get to see her and hear Winfrey voicing her forthright comments. And it didn't say, but it's just.
Of course, the show was very different in '86, wasn't it? Because you didn't turn it into a positive spin.
No.
Experience
It was
until
very much like Morton Downey Jr.
Yeah.
It was like in the '80s, all the talk shows were basically
tabloidy, muckraking.
Yeah, the freaks of the week is what they were.
That's
how I got on.
Why you were on.
There was her most shocking show, she believes, was when she did on a Devil Worshippers. It was unbelievable. She said one boy in the program confessed that he actually witnessed the sacrifice of young children to the devil. And she said, to those who criticize her for giving airtime to such antisocial trends, her answer is, it's a dangerous development in society and people should know about it.
Well, remember her first big one that did make a difference was the one where the guy was swimming and he had HIV? And the whole town,
No. It was like a boy who used the public pool. Oh, God, I remember that. It makes me. And the whole school, like, ostracized him. And Oprah did teach us.
They went back like 25 for the 25th year anniversary or something and spoke with him.
But I do want to say, though, that even then, the power of Oprah, before she even went national when we were on the show, is that we were booked on every single morning talk show from Boston down to Savannah. It was me me and Sally Randall and
Michael
Elizabeth.
Musso.
No, it was
Oh.
Michael Musso, Elizabeth Saltzman.
Oh, yeah.
And Steven
Yeah.
Sabin. And
Tama
we-
Janowitz, maybe?
Not Tama, but
And what were you doing? Like, where were you booked on all these different
well,
shows?
but she loved me. Oh, I remember Oprah just loved me. I had costume changes during every commercial, and I would come out in a different little outfit, and everyone would applaud. And then she still had people call in, and everyone was asking me about my little outfits.
I mean, Phil Donahue, and in interviews, even at that time, she was so gracious. She goes, without Phil Donahue, there wouldn't be Oprah Winfrey. But there was something about the specialness of her. I say, like, Oprah taught us how to feel. She gave the nation a language of how
really
to.
good because Phil Donahue was very sort of cerebral almost. Like he
Yes.
ran around the crowd,
Charlie
but it was
Rose,
very
yes.
like
And it was
thought out.
topic-y, and he was sort of your afternoon affair with this handsome devil.
But
Right.
Oprah was someone that we could relate to physically. I mean, she was not
Yes.
a beautiful, chic
Well, you
Hollywood
could.
person.
You could. I was
Yeah,
very.
yeah. So, moving on, James, to number 3 in our countdown of the 80s, things that made us go, wow, what have we got?
Number 3.
1987, right? Are we at 1987? You just did 1986?
Yeah,
That's
you're
right.
at 1987.
1987, dear God in
How
heaven.
long have we got?
Okay, I was a has-been by 1987. I was over and out. My It Boy days were done.
Oprah in '86 has been in '87.
People spit on me as I walked down the sidewalk. I couldn't get arrested to save my life. I couldn't get my picture into details. It was bad. I was just considering packing up and moving back to, Saginaw. It was over. I do remember that was in, it was because Andy Warhol died on February, what was it, 3rd? 22nd. I remember he died, and instantly that scene, the details scene, the area scene was over. It was like he was the conduit that connected. He was the glue that sort of brought all of everybody to New York together.
So truly end of an era.
It was
when
the end of
Andy
an
died.
era, and it was the death of downtown. Remember,
Yes,
Michael Musto wrote the famous
piece.
article. Yeah, and his funeral was on April 1st, 1987, and we were convinced that it was a hoax and that he was going to rise from the
Pop
dead.
out of a cookie jar.
And there is a picture. There's a video of me entering into St. Patrick's Cathedral with Liza Minnelli
she
Halston.
went, of course she
I was
went.
there. I was with Liza Halston, Michael Musto, Lisa Edelstein, and myself walking in, and I am feeling my oats. I am in a fake fur jacket. I'm doing my hair like this. I'm flipping on. I'm smiling for the cameras and waving like I am back. I am back, boy. But Warhol did not rise from the dead.
So then what happened?
Awkward.
So then what happened was Who's That Girl came out. Remember? That was the movie. That was the best movie
Madonna,
of the year.
Who's That Girl?
Who's That Girl? And
Why
then
would that make any difference?
I don't know. I'm just talking about 1987 things. But what happened?
It's a new board game. You have to weave together everything happened in a year and make it about you.
But after that, after the death of downtown, I remember I cut my hair. I turned into a boy. I had been a club kid, and now I was turning into a boy. I got myself a boyfriend. I got a job at the Tunnel. I was doing.
See, all the clubs were open. I mean, Michael Musso said downtown was dead.
Yeah.
Andy Warhol was dead, but you had the Palladium, you had Limelight, you had the Tunnel. I mean, you had was Area still open?
Area was still open.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you had the Pyramid. I mean, you had CBGB's,
But-
you had China Club. You had this amazing lineup of nightclub venues.
It was all falling apart though. The
Okay.
thing that was happening was Nels
Nels
was taking off at the time, and that was sort of like the God's
Oh,
waiting
the
room.
sort of bottle service,
Right,
the
yes.
living room feel.
But at the time, I got a job, and it was my way of reinventing myself and going back into the clubs.
The Gap.
I started working at the Tunnel, and I was doing the VIP ropes, and they assigned me a bouncer, and that bouncer, I've told you this story, was Vin Diesel. Yeah, Vin Diesel and I spent a summer together, and his father owned a theater in downtown New York, and so he was a little theater boy, and Mark Vincent was his name at the time, and Mark and I would sing show tunes from 10 o'clock at night till 6 in the morning. We would sit there and do high kicks and sing and everything. Had the best time. He was the sweetest guy on the planet, and that paved my way for my comeback in September of 1987 when I did the Door of the World, opening night of the world, and I was back. I was on that giant box picking and choosing who was who could come in, and that was like, then all of a sudden it was James had never left.
But it's good to experience those ups and downs, baby.
It
That's
taught
life.
me some humility. It
Yeah.
really did.
Did Vin Diesel leave you? Like, did he become a huge movie
How did
star
it
while
end?
you were doing the ropes?
No,
or,
actually,
like,
Vin Diesel stayed at the Tunnel for almost 8 years. He was and he was one of that person who always said, I'm going to be someone, I'm going to be someone, I'm going to be an actor, and nobody ever paid any attention to him. And he was a bouncer, and we thought he would live and die at the tunnel. And then he got a small part in Saving Private Ryan, and Steven Spielberg saw him in something.
That's right.
And cast him.
Can I ask you a dumb question just to connect some of your stories? If you and Vin Diesel, what was his name then?
Mark Vincent.
Mark Vincent were singing show tunes and you happened to hit the Annie songbook, what part would he have played?
He would have been Daddy Warbucks.
Okay. Of course. I thought he might have done a great Tomorrow. I don't know.
Tell us about how gay was he?
Well, that's just it, because he wasn't gay at all at the time. And I remember my roommate Anne would come and spend all night long in little bustiers and little mini skirts trying to pick him up, and she never got him. But everyone was trying to pick him up. All the drag queens were trying to pick him up. The club kids were trying. He never went home with anyone. However, I remember hearing around that 7th and 8th year that he was sleeping with some of the boys, some of the muscle queens from Mark.
And did he have that very gravelly voice?
He had the very gravelly. He had hair, but he had that little body, and he was just, like I said, just as charismatic as can be and as sweet as can be.
So you're saying allegedly, according to rumor,
that near the end, yes, he was sleeping with muscle queens, maybe, possibly. I don't know.
We'll talk to our lawyers about that and see if it can be continued.
Vin, come on the show. Yes. Reunite with James.
I know, and I've never seen him since. I have never seen him since then. But anyway, I want to say that...
in the spirit of Oprah, we have a surprise for you. Vin Diesel, come on over here.
I do also want to say that year was the year of Black Tuesday when I lost most of my trust fund.
It was, right?
Yeah.
Well, it was Black Monday. It was Black Tuesday.
It was
Australia.
October 19th.
Yes, but it was Black Monday in Europe, but there was the time change, and we didn't get it until Black Tuesday.
Right.
And I remember walking down the street with Musto and seeing the newspaper headline on the Post, and just saying, "Oh fuck, I need to call Lisa Spooner, my CPA."
You're not rich.
No.
All right. So number 2.
Number 2.
In 1988, in April, was the Andy Warhol estate sale, which quite frankly was the sale of the century. They were raising money for the Andy Warhol Visual Foundation, blah, blah, blah. And they had something like 10,000 lots that they sold over the course of 10 days. I think they were hoping to raise 15 million. And in the end, everything went for like 25 million, including, of course, and most famously, perhaps, the collection of cookie jars.
Yes.
Cookie jars.
That went for something like $250,000. Yes. I mean, anything he possessed. I mean, I always thought...
He was a pack rat like nobody had ever seen before.
He was a hoarder. But I always thought this was what was fantastic about him, that he kind of created this pharaonic mausoleum in this beautiful townhouse that he had. He just stuffed it with stuff. It was kind of like Tutankhamun's tomb. And I wish in a way it would have been nice if they could have preserved it or something, you know. But the way they unearthed it and then they exhibited it all and you could go see it. I actually didn't get to go to. I didn't get to go.
Was
to
it Sotheby's?
Yeah, I didn't get to go to it. Did you?
I didn't, but I remember. I think I've told you guys before that I went to the factory in '87. No, '86, right beforehand. And it was that thing where there were Van Goghs on top of Picassos, on top of just stacks and stacks of like, you know, billion-dollar art, and then next to crap, next to kitschy things, and it was just, he was just fascinating like that, and I would have loved to have spent time in that townhouse.
I mean, what an amazing man too, the way he managed to alchemically almost make money out of nothing. I mean, it was like, you know, someone suggested paying dollar bills, and that's what he did, and the next thing you know, they're selling for tens of millions of dollars. At the time, I was in '88 working at Drexel Burnham.
Oh, yeah.
And Drexel Burnham was this go-go investment bank on Wall Street.
And that's when you wrote the book about Ivan Boesky.
The book was called, a beautiful title, an alluring title, an exciting title, a best-selling title. It was called The Junk Bond Revolution. And it was all about high-yield bonds and Michael Milken. Michael Milken was the man who basically invented junk bonds, and Ivan Boesky was one of his #1 clients. Milken was the man who financed a lot of the hostile takeovers in the 80s, became wildly unpopular. And in fact, at his trial, he was done for insider trading. At his trial, there was outrage that in 1 year he earned $55 million. I mean, compared to today, what some of these hedge fund people earn, $55 million is nothing.
And
but
then,
the moral outrage and condemnation of him. Anyway, yeah.
And then remember, I came to your pool party and I had on that really cute Drexel Burnham, like raggedy.
You had an old wife beater.
And I was like, I don't know what it is. I just thought it was cute because it was falling apart.
1987, you went to his pool party?
No, he came to a pool party
in
a few years ago.
2008.
Paul Blake, I sat him down and talked to him for like 2 hours about Drexel Burnham, its significance in Wall Street, why they because
I was like,
I gotta get back to LA.
Blake's like, I don't get paid enough to this.
I do remember Sotheby's that year also had another great auction, and that was Marlene Dietrich. Remember the Marlene Dietrich jewels?
That was that year.
It was that year, and I remember that Carolina Herrera bought her emeralds, and she came to the world wearing these emeralds on hip hop night, and it was one of those scary nights that there were always gunshots and everything like that. And we were like, "You can't go in, ma'am. You can't go in." And she went in dressed in like $20 million worth of emeralds in this just I mean, like really, really, like I don't even know how to say it in a way that like just thugs. I mean, just really, really, and they all
danger.
They made a path for her. They were like, "Ma'am, would you like to sit down?" They went and got her like champagne, like all these like just gangster rappers were just as nice as can be to this woman.
You see what good breeding does, James.
But it was one of those things I think that nobody had ever seen anybody in 20 million, and they were, instead of like ripping the emeralds off of her and run,
she started the whole bling thing.
Yeah, and that they could not have been more like sweeter and nicer to her, and that's just
nice.
I'm sorry, I hijacked your.
You lived many lives, James.
So we've been counting down the 80s, things that made us go wow in the 80s, and I think you can see a narrative emerging of money and success and that sort of obsession with materialism. But when we come back after the break, because we have to take a quick break, we will reveal the number one thing that made us go wow in 1989. We've reached the decade's end.
I don't remember 1989.
It's a bad year for James.
Radio Andy, SiriusXM.
You're listening to World of Wonders Wow Report. Things that make us go wow.
All right, kids, listen. DragCon 2018 is on its way to you, honey. May 11th, 12th, and of course the 13th. We have moved to the South Hall. Kids, don't forget to get your tickets at RuPaul's DragCon.com. Honey, get them tickets. Bitch, get in here. We got booths for your nerves. It's going to be amazing, epic. You thought New York was big. You thought last year's LA DragCon was big. Wait till you see the South Hall, honey. We are coming with all the stops, the biggest hair, the biggest costumes. You're gonna see season 1 through what? 10, honey. Come see us, RuPaul's DragCon 2018.
Well, welcome back to the Wow Report. We've been counting down the top 10 things that made us go wow in the 80s, and we've gone year by year.
Yes, we have.
So we started at 1980.
We're doing 10, and what could the next one be?
We reached 1989.
Number 1.
Okay, so I have a theory that 1989 was all about sex. It was Madonna, Like a Prayer, that controversial video that made the Pepsi, like having been backing her for her tour, they pulled out after she was writhing around.
I was obsessed with that, and my mom would let me watch it, but I had to ask her.
That Jesus Christ was so hot.
Burning crosses.
I was in kindergarten.
And also, it was also the year of Sally Field, I'll Have What She's Having.
No, Meg Ryan.
No.
Sally Field. Yeah, Meg Ryan.
When Harry Met Sally.
Yes.
It all comes together. Sally was somewhere in that equation.
Fucking senile. It's appalling.
That's why we're here together.
But she has an orgasm. Do you want to do the orgasm?
Never mind.
Yes.
No, but that was an amazing moment in history.
It was also when Sex, Lies, and Videotape was released, which is amazing, like the sort of progenitor of independent film.
Yes, it was kind of the first independent film that everyone was talking about that you had to see.
And James, the Rob Lowe sex tape.
Oh, well, now you reeled me back in.
I remember seeing the tape on a tape. I was at HBO now. I was an assistant at HBO. And I remember that it was such a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. It was like watching pixelate. Like,
Yeah,
it wasn't,
How do you watch stuff like that back then?
But you had no other choice.
Well, I remember
that's sort of him, and I guess that's a penis.
That's big. It was
like,
a big penis. You could still, even though it was a copy of a copy, you could still make it out.
I remember the tunnel had Mars had just opened. Remember the club Mars, and Rudolph had done it, and there was a giant wall of televisions, which was just very new, and it was that on a loop going over and over again, and we would all just stand there watching Rob Lowe's penis for hours at a time.
And he was so polite in it. Do you remember, like, he was trading off with his friend, and they were sort of Mr. Lowe and Mr. this and Mr. that. And of course, it was a career.
Mr. Lowe, would you like to take a chance?
That was it. It was like,
Mr.
your turn
Smith,
now.
no, it's your turn.
Wasn't that your song she sang?
Anywho, it was also like a career ruiner, wasn't it? Like, if this was before sex, like, because now you have to have a sex tape to have a career.
It did. It took him a good 15, 20 years before he
was a pioneer.
Yeah. But what's your 1989 memories, James?
I do remember 1989. I was going uptown a lot. We were voguing a lot. We were going to the voguing balls.
Really?
Up to Harlem.
Because Vogue came out in 1990.
Yeah, but we were doing it in 88
Yeah.
and 89. We were up there. I remember Julie Jules won Best Face one time, and that was the first time a Caucasian girl had ever won at the balls. I remember I won Master and Servant at one of the leather balls.
Master and Servant?
Well, no, I was
So versatile.
I had a bone in my mouth and a collar on, and I was walking on all fours.
Servant.
And there was a giant dog. Kyoki was dressed in a dog costume with a leather hat and a leather vest, and it was when the master becomes the servant.
The hunter becomes the hunted.
And so I had the bone in my mouth, and the dog was walking me, and I won the House of Field.
I think we did a whole show on James St. James's 80s, roaring 80s.
True. Why were we talking about art doll stuff?
But,
I just jotted down for 89 the top 10 TV shows. And surprisingly, number 2, Roseanne. It all comes back. Number 1, Bill Cosby. 3 was Cheers. 4 was A Different World, which was a Cosby thing. America's Funniest Home Videos. Number 5, still on TV.
Yes.
Our favorite show ever, Golden Girls.
And it's not still on, but it's always being rerun.
It's on right now.
Yeah, no.
60 Minutes, number 7, still on, still going strong. The Wonder Years, a little nostalgia. Empty Nest, which was after Golden Girls, and Monday Night Football, which, by the way, going back to my first story, 1980, do you know who was the first person to announce John Lennon's death on the television?
Joe Namath.
Close.
Oh, Howard Cosell.
Howard Cosell on Monday Night Football. They were keeping Yoko,
And now
Yoko Ono wanted to keep it from. They agreed not to announce it until she could get to her son because she thought her son was home, Sean, watching TV. But there was a producer.
And then in 1989, I did crack with Sean.
But there was a producer.
Now we go to what they call dead air.
Just chop that out, except for the YouTube people. I'm sorry. Go back to.
Okay,
No,
so
I have not.
Yoko, I'm on the tip of my seat.
But there was an ABC news producer who just happened to be in the emergency room with some injury when John Lennon came in with all the police around him, and he knew, and he called Roone Arledge, who was the head of ABC News and ABC Football, and they're like, "What do we do?" And Howard Cosell and Frank Gifford were on the air, and they debated during the commercial, like, should we do this or not do this? And Howard Cosell says, this is going to preempt the game. This is going to take attention away from the game. And Frank Gifford was like, this is more important than the game.
Right.
And you need to say it. And Howard Cosell had interviewed John Lennon at one point, so he broke the news. But it was like, it was such an emotional, it's hard to explain. I know I'm going backward, but like, it's hard to explain how important John Lennon is and was, and how his death was just devastated. Like people didn't know him. John Lennon's part of like the fabric of our pop culture.
Also, the Berlin Wall fell in '89.
I had nothing to do with it.
Tear down that wall.
Game Boy.
Oh, right.
Leona Hemsley.
Oh, right. The little people
But James was winning football competitions. So James wins. As once again, what we learned after an hour of radio is that James St. James has a more interesting life.
That's all we have time for today, I'm afraid. But do you have Wow Presents Plus? Because James St. James is on it. You can just go and gorge yourself on Wow Presents Plus. $3.99 a month, less than the price of a latte, but so much more.
It's like Netflix for really cool people.
Actually, kind of is like, yeah. RuPaul's Drag Race Season 10 on Thursdays at 8, Untucked. Set It Like Sahan starts on April 11th, next Wednesday on Bravo.
Sexy, wonderful Ryan Serhan from
God,
Million
he's
Darling
so
in New
hot.
York.
He
has a new show, and you have to watch it. And there's actually a music video. Have you seen that?
It's so cute.
It's pretty funny.
We have to get Ryan to come on the show.
Well, we may have him on next week. Maybe.
All right, until same time, same place next week. Go out and do something that makes the world go
Wow!
Oh, like totally.